Hello there and welcome to a Blood Red podcast special hosted by me, Joe Rimmer, joined today by Reach's Business of Football writer, Dave Powell. How are we, Dave?
Very well. Slightly tired, but busy week in the US last week, but back to it. Liverpool accounts.
Yeah. Plenty to discuss.
Lots.
Before we get into sponsorship deals and all that, we've got our own sponsorship deal to thank our friends at NordVPN. So, you know the score by now. To get the best discounts off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. And our link gives you 4 months extra on a 2-year plan. There's no risk at all with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box. And before we get started, we are live on YouTube. So if you're watching, I'm keeping an eye on it. So drop some questions, some thoughts, some comments in the comments box, and I will put them to Dave as we go through the podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else, give us some stars, give us a like, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, all those nice things. And drop me an email, joe.rimmer@reachplc.com, if you'd like to ask a future question for a future pod, or you'd like me to put something to Dave in the future, and I'll come back to you. Always happy to take questions there. But yes, Dave, Liverpool's accounts came out on Friday. Always a busy week for you, aren't they, when the accounts come out? But we've got plenty to get into. But just first of all, give us the sort of nutshell overall, broad strokes for anyone listening who perhaps isn't up to speed on them.
I think that we kind of had an idea what they would be because last month was the release of the Deloitte Football Money League, and they had conversations with the biggest clubs in Europe, so the 20 highest earning clubs, and we kind of had an idea what it would be, and it proved to be around that. We didn't know what the profit and loss was going to look like, so the headline figure was a £57 million pre-tax loss, but that was kind of built up from 614 million in revenue, 204 million kind of arriving from broadcast revenue, 308 million from commercial, which was up significantly, and 102 million from matchday revenue, which was up significantly because of the completion of the Anfield Road end. But yeah, I mean, the loss can be largely attributed to the fact that last year they had, last season was one without Champions League football, and for any side which has had Champions League football as part of its business model for a considerable amount of time, that's very impactful, because not only from the money that derives from prize money or qualification in the first place, it's the broadcast sums are huge. That said, if it would have been, last year was the last year of the old Champions League model, less valuable, backing it this year. So accounts are always a funny one. I say this all the time. It's a snapshot in time which looks back 12 months ago, and the situation now is very, very different. And the club will be on course across the board, I think, for record revenues again.
I know we've got a bit of an agenda here, but just to follow up on that, then how risky is that as a strategy for top level football clubs banking so much on the Champions League? It's obviously so important, but anything can happen, and you can find yourself out of it quite quickly, can't you?
You can. It's very difficult. You look at Arsenal. So between 2016 and 2023, they had no Champions League football, and the gap which was created financially between them and the rest was enormous. So it's taken them a long time to turn that around. Now their revenues are on a huge incline because of Champions League football the last 2 years. It's just the nature of high-level sport, and European football in particular, while it's attractive to investors because of the potential returns and the high value of the sporting assets, it carries an enormous amount of risk because of, whether it's, we have promotion and relegation in European football, or we have the fact that you can qualify for Europe or not, and it's, if you don't, then it's hugely impactful. So you only have to look at United now. They are in a Manchester United. I always have a real problem when people just say United and assume there's only one United. That's kind of a club which is faced with a long period outside of Champions League now, with revenues which are challenged, the need to rebuild, the need to kind of wipe the slate clean, but not being able to, and being able to put a competitive team on the pitch at the same time. So Liverpool's was unexpected. I think it arrived from, Newcastle had kind of a banner season, didn't they?
Yeah, of course.
But that's always going to happen. There's always a risk of that. And Nottingham Forest haven't won this season. And Newcastle are part of that conversation now. Chelsea are better than they were last season, albeit they're struggling with form right now. And Arsenal are back as a kind of a force to be reckoned with in the Premier League in terms of Champions League qualification again. So there's always going to be competition for those spots. I think the season Liverpool missed out. They had a bad run, but it wasn't one which you would think would be enough to kind of knock them out of their stride too much. But that said, Newcastle had a great season. So it's a very challenging environment running a high-level football club, because what happens in one season, if you miss on the Champions League, it has a detrimental impact to what you can do maybe in the transfer market the following year, because you can never bank on Champions League football as a given. It's something which everyone strives for. But I think Liverpool's return to it, I mean, how many consecutive years has it been in the Champions League? Because they had their own period out of the Champions League for a considerable amount of time, similar in the way Arsenal did, which meant that revenue gap existed for Liverpool. Yeah. Now, because of their long period back in the Champions League, they've been able to close that.
Yeah, with the exception of the season that you're talking about, I think they've qualified every year since 2017-18.
Yeah, and that's allowed them to, and in two of those years, they've won the Champions League. They reached the final in 20. It
was the final in two of the
other years. So they've been able to derive a lot of income from the Champions League, and their coefficients improved and everything like that. So I think, but they're back at the table now. So again, this is just a snapshot of. I think it's an interesting one that this time around, because it's a snapshot of what happens when kind of bumps in the road do occur. They've been able to ride it out because they've been able to lift up revenues in other ways, and also they manage the club, on a more sustainable footing. Whereas, I think for other clubs, it's kind of more damaging to miss out on the top four.
We'll get on to other clubs. There's so much to discuss there, but I mean, like you say, that they've found different ways to bump up revenues, record commercial revenues of 308 million. I mean, this was always FSG's plan, wasn't it, to grow these revenues, make the club self-sustainable. How have they managed to do that this time and reach that record number?
Well, you have to give them. Spoke to a commercial director of a Premier League club not too long ago, and they were saying that people now want more return on their investment than ever. You can't just, it's long gone are the days of advertising hoardings being the only thing which matters to brands and having exposure on the front of the shirt. It's everything. So the fact that Liverpool have a really good community and the kind of the foundation and everything they do kind of runs from top to bottom. Brands kind of like that, and also they're a global brand. Everyone knows Liverpool. They're a very safe brand because they tend to be more cautious about some of the things they get involved with, which means that you look at the kind of companies they engage with, the large blue chip companies. So they had Google Pixel, UPS, Peloton, Japan Air. So it's all big companies. They've not gone down the route of betting companies with great exposure, or crypto companies which have carry a high amount of risk and are still seen as quite volatile. So they've managed to do it by being a strong business and demonstrating success on the pitch. Yes, this season we're focusing on was kind of one with a bump in the road, but ultimately they are seen as kind of a company which delivers and yields results, and a football club which delivers results on the pitch and has reach in all their important markets. So North America, Asia, the MENA region, places like that. So they are, I think they're one of the best in class at being able to draw a portfolio of partners that are kind of really strong blue chip ones. If you look at some of the rivals, I mean, there's a bit more around the edges of what might be deemed acceptable by some fans. But obviously Liverpool have to operate within the reality of they have to have more of a social conscience than some football clubs because of the very nature of the football club. So I think that is a draw for some brands.
Elsewhere, wages up 4% to 386 million. And the bonuses for the return to the Champions League, football being part of that. We will get on to transfer spend. We've already had a question on transfers. It obviously is a big part of what fans think about when they think about football and business. But that is an area where FSG have always had quite strong spend, isn't it, on wages?
Yeah, but the success tends to correlate more closely with wage spend than it does transfer spend and net spend. And that kind of bears out if you look at the kind of money that kind of Manchester United have spent. But wage spend tends to be in line with that because you pay bonuses when success occurs. And, the better you become, or if you become a Champions League side, players want more money to come and play for you. So there is that element of it. So the wage bill was going to rise because of Liverpool's return to being a dominant force in kind of domestically and internationally. This time around, yes, so it's a return to Champions League football activates clauses in a majority of players' contracts, I imagine, around Champions League bonuses because it's so valuable financially to the football club that Liverpool, FSG have always tended to kind of leverage their contracts in terms of there's add-ons are significant, bonuses are significant. So there is that way of, because on one hand, if you are, yes, you have to pay more that year, but you're also going to get more revenue because you've achieved success. So that's the way they do it. It's a bit more risk averse, and FSG are notoriously risk averse. But this is kind of an understandable one. I don't know what the bonus structure looked like, if any, for winning the League Cup. But that is, there is elements of there will be some financial kicker for that because it doesn't deliver much financially, the League Cup, but it's silverware and it's ultimately what the football club should be about. So the rise is understandable. They also made additions, significant ones in terms of McAllister and Szoboszlai. So sometimes within that there is signing on fees paid for some of these players, so which can account towards your to your wage bill for that particular year. So it's all been able to be explained away, I suppose, that the rise, even though it's very easy to focus on it. Why was there an increase in wages in a season when we were in the Europa League?
Yeah,
because it focuses on the period of time, which includes the post-season when they actually made, they qualified for the Champions League for the following year, and they also engaged in new contracts and bonus payments. So it's all, it's all in the numbers. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the big numbers is match day revenue going up. That's up to a record-breaking 102 million. First time they broke through the 100 million barrier. Again, when FSG took over, there was obviously talk about moving grounds. They obviously decided to stay and develop Anfield. Those developments are complete for the time being. Anfield looks very different from when I was growing up. And Liverpool are reaping the benefits of that, aren't they?
Definitely. So there is and I mentioned this in previous podcasts, there will be a time in the not too distant future when broadcast revenues aren't going to be underpinning every single thing that a football club does, because there's already signs domestically that they won't. Because, although the broadcast deal for the Premier League is 6.7 billion across the next 4 years, that's 4 years, when usually it's been 3 years, and that's giving away 270 games a season instead of 200 games. What that means is the value per game is diminished. So there's already signs that broadcast revenues we might have hit the peak and they might start stagnating and then ultimately declining. That means that football clubs have to find ways to earn revenue in other places, and there is a big focus from a lot of clubs on the bricks and mortar and trying to make that work for them in a more meaningful way. So the 102 million is the first time they've broken through that 100 million barrier. That means that themselves, Spurs, Arsenal, Manchester United are the clubs to have been able to breach that figure, and that's important. Manchester City now are trying to do what they can to raise revenues with the Etihad and the campus they have around there, because it's important to kind of make the most of what's there. So yes, you are satisfying demand for tickets, but you're also adding to your ability to do other things. So the hospitality and things like that at Liverpool has increased massively. Does
this take into account the concerts they held last summer, or is that going to be in this season's account?
That should be in this season's.
Yes.
So the ability to host more events. I mean, Liverpool are bound by the restrictions that are in place with Liverpool City Council, that they can only do 6 non-football events a year, but they know that they can get world-class acts to come and play at Liverpool now. So having a world-class venue is important to attract world-class acts, which they did last summer. They had Taylor Swift for three sellout nights. This year they've got Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel. They've got kind of a host of host of people. So if you look across the Premier League now, there's more and more clubs doing that. Spurs have got Beyonce doing 6 nights at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. They have the NFL there. So there's only so much Liverpool can do with Anfield, but they're kind of trying to maximise that. In the future, what would they do? I wonder whether they would try and do. And I know Sam Kennedy was kind of the FSG CEO in the past few years. He commented around doing more with Anfield seems very challenging now after the completion of this particular redevelopment. But maybe there's the ability to do kind of ancillary development around the city, whether that's hotels, Hotel Liverpool or somewhere, in the LGLFC somewhere in the city, or live music venue that might exist somewhere in the city. So
that's what they've done in Boston, isn't it?
Yeah, so they got the MGM. I think that's the name of it. I think it's the MGM at Fenway. So that's a 5,000-seater music venue, which is adjacent to Fenway Park. And it all counts towards that. So I wonder whether that might be something to do to bring aid that revenue into the football club. But all this points to long-term commitment to being custodians of the football club until such time the value starts to diminish and the cost of competing becomes too much. I think that it will remain in situ. So.
You mentioned all football clubs. How does Liverpool's then match their revenue compare to some of their rivals, and how has FSG's development of Liverpool since they come in the ground? How much of an advantage has that given them?
If you look back, over the past decade, United were clear streets ahead of everyone else in terms of revenue. Now they're still ahead of most, but the gap between that now is the kind of single-digit millions in some cases before it was tens, if not hundreds of millions, because of a long-term lack of competitive success, but also that they've kind of absentee ownership that they've had has meant the club has just focused on transfer spend and not on kind of adding to what's around them, and that's not the case for everyone. So Liverpool have invested in the bricks and mortar, yes, but they've also been more cautious around their transfer spend. Wages spend has always been high, and I think about 2 years ago it was the highest in the Premier League, largely attributed to the fact that they'd achieved a lot of success. So the wage bill now that's only going to decrease upon a lack of success. So that's the more successful the team is, that's going to keep on going higher. So there is a need to continue to pay for these things. So they have to try and find money elsewhere. And transfer spend's always a thorny issue. You look at Manchester United's gross squad cost. I think over the last few years is about 1.1 billion compared to Liverpool's, which is 700 and odd million. So it doesn't always it doesn't go hand in hand with success. I think FSG, yes, they have a lot of detractors largely for their transfer spend, and in some instances, I can absolutely understand the ire that arrives when it comes to not strengthening from a position, when in a position to do so. But also, the idea is that they were very clear. I think when they came in, that this was to create a football club where success was sustainable, but also it was sustainable financially, and that's very challenging because football is largely a loss-making business. If you look across the board in Europe, most clubs hemorrhage cash, and there's not much profit to be made, or year on year. The whole thing comes down to creating value around what the business is, and Liverpool have done that. They bought it for 300 million. And it's worth now probably 4.5 to 5 billion for FSG, and it will still go higher. I mean, I think I did a piece last year around an investor pitch deck which said that there was some suggestions that it could climb as high as 10 billion. I don't think that's going to be the case because I think there'll be some roadblocks that arrive before that. But you can see why. I think what they've said has come to pass. I mean, I don't think it's changed. I think the focus on stability is, while it can be a stick they used to beat them with, I think largely it's what has allowed. I mean, they've had 2 managers in the last 10 years, and that's a rarity. Yes, Manchester City have, but Manchester City also been extremely successful. So I do think it's kind of been a bit of a gift and a curse for them. but it has put them in a position of strength moving forward because we've got new financial cost controls coming in, whereby Liverpool still have plenty of room for manoeuvre. And also Liverpool have done their redevelopment of Anfield for the time being, and they've maximised what they can out of it. So Arsenal now are faced with having to find more money to redo the Emirates to get more value out of that, because that stadium's 20 years old. Manchester United are faced with finding $2 billion odd for a new stadium. And Spurs have already done theirs. So Spurs, Liverpool in a good position. Chelsea, are going to need to can't get much money from more than they get from Stamford Bridge. So they're going to face the challenge of trying to build a new stadium or redevelop something in the most expensive neighbourhood in London. Manchester City are working the way towards trying to improve the Etihad. I know there's always questions about how how much capacity is actually needed there. But they've also got some question marks around long term, Guardiola's future in the direction of the club. So I think Liverpool are in a good spot. Newcastle are faced with having to find money for either a redevelopment or a new build. So for the clubs that have already done that kind of work, when the interest rates were lower, even with the financial cost controls that are coming in, they've kind of got some plenty of road to travel down. And I think Liverpool are in a very healthy position to continue being successful, and even being more, I know they're more minded to watch things financially, but that's the way it's going to go. I think the era of excess is kind of over. That arrived in the Premier League in the early 2010s through to the early 2020s before COVID, because more broadcast revenues were on such a steep incline that clubs knew every year there was going to be more and more and more money, and interest rates were lower. But now interest rates are high. The money's the money isn't as guaranteed to go as far. Costs are increasing across the board. So there are a few notes in the Liverpool account actually around costs have gone up enormously. So up 88%. In terms of admin costs since 2018, that's from 320 million to 600 million. Staff costs up 86% from 2018. That's from 208 million to 386 million. So it's not cheap to run a football club at the top level and stay competitive, which means that in order to do so, you have to find ways of managing it so that you can cope with bumps in the road. Klopp was a bump in the road they weren't expecting. That when he told FSG in that November that year, they weren't expecting that. They had still had years to run his contract. Obviously, we heard about how the wheels would fall off when Klopp goes and FSG would be exposed, and ultimately the idea that bringing in someone that matches the football club and can work within what's there has led them to Arne Slot. So, and it's not working out all too badly. So yeah, they have lots of reason to be cheerful, and the financials for next season will look a lot different than these. So, I think there's reasons to be cheerful.
I want to talk transfers because we're already getting questions. But before I do, you're not a Liverpool fan?
No. I'm a Chester fan.
You're a Chester fan. So I want to get your opinion. You obviously report on all the clubs around the country in terms of finances. I look at the comments already and we criticism over FSG and some people backing them. Where do you stand on them? What do you think of them when you look at all the other owners in the league? You look at what's going on around football. What's your opinion of FSG as owners?
I come at it from the idea of being custodians and looking after. There is transfers are dopamine, and it's that's what the media cycle largely dependent on transfers because they're interesting. They're a very interesting part of the football. The football is 90 minutes. Now the football is a global game, has a global audience, and in order to fill the talk around the rest of what goes on outside the game, outside the match days, transfers are a huge driver of that, and everyone wants things to progress and to do more. And I get that 1,000%. I do think the contract situation is something which has not been handled well, and I don't think it reflects particularly well that it's been allowed to drag on this long and start to seep into the public eye with players making public statements around alluding to certain elements of it. I don't think that's a great reflection on where it's at. However, in the main, if you look across the board, the football club has improved dramatically under their ownership. So, and those who say it hasn't, it's just not true, because they have financially. They have. If you look around, visually, the football club has transformed. The quality of the football has transformed. But I mean, they would have won more were it not that they were existing at a time when Manchester City was so dominant. And it took, you look at some of the seasons that Klopp had at Liverpool, that was enough to win more titles than he had, done in normal circumstances. It's an unpopular opinion, but I think they're good owners. But ultimately, what do people want from their owners? They want them to spend. Todd Bowley and Clearlake Capital have spent loads, and that's not turning out how they expected. Nor does it show any signs of turning out how they expected, and it puts a huge amount of risk on the football club. And ultimately, the idea is to leave. The football club is supposed to exist beyond just one round of ownership, and it's supposed to be in a position to be successful, whoever comes in. So I think in that case, I think FSG have been good owners. That
leads us on quite nicely to a question that we've had in the comments. But before we do, I read the comments and you think, if you don't say FSG out, then you're an FSG shrill. And I think the way I look at it, you can criticise them. That I think they've been good owners. I grew up in Liverpool, as you said, visually. You walk around the stadium, you take people to the stadium. It looks a million times better than it did when I was growing up. The football's better. We now live in an era where Liverpool regularly compete for the biggest prizes, whether that be the league, the Champions League. They don't always win them, and like you say, that they existed in a time when Manchester City have been so dominant. But again, when I was growing up, they would compete maybe for one league title every 4 or 5 seasons, and it would be a big effort to get up there, and then they would fall away. And obviously, transfers is an area where you can criticise them, and I certainly think that they could have taken more chances in previous seasons. I mean, Klopp said that himself. He said he wished that the ownership at times had maybe rolled the dice a bit more in the transfer market, and like you said, the contract situation doesn't reflect really well. But on the whole, when you look around at some of the mess has been made, and Manchester United is obviously a club that they've made an utter mess of. I think how can you not be happy with what they've done? But obviously, a lot of people find their flaws bigger than their positive points.
And that's all. That's all about opinion, and it's. But I do think this comes at a time when they are the issue around Salah, Van Dijk, and Alexander Arnold is an important one, because especially as how important they are to success at present. The problem is for FSG is it challenges, not in the case of Trent so much, because he's still a player in his prime, although he's a Liverpool product, so they really want to be that would not reflect well on them to let go a talent like Trent for free. However, the age profile of Salah and Van Dijk would probably be now. You would have FSG be looking at wage reductions under normal circumstances. Of course, you can't do that, because in the world football at the moment, there isn't many like Virgil van Dijk. There isn't many footballers, full stop, like Mohamed Salah in world football at the moment. So you're faced with this quandary that they don't fit the profile of what they want. However, they have to be more flexible in terms of what's right for the club, and also the brand, because Salah is huge for Liverpool, globally. Yeah. And also I think it reflects badly. Like I said before, it's gone on this long. They do need to be more flexible at times, and I think that's a fair criticism to say they've not acted at some moments in the market when they really should have done. Yeah. And that's probably, has it cost Liverpool maybe one title, maybe not pushing on from a period, I think that's probably yes. Yeah. But I think the problem they have at the moment is Salah will want wages in line with what his talent deserves, and that means you're going to have to say some big wages. I think it'd be more about the length of a contract and caveats around it than them wanting to stay. Of course, them both to stay, or all three of them to stay. But it'll be around kind of protecting them for the longer term. But I do get the criticism around them. They've also made some seriously misguided errors. The European Super League for one. You can't just ignore that. Yes, they apologised, but it was such a it was.
It exposed certain thinking.
And it did. It exposed the fact that this is a money making play. But spoiler alert, it is for everyone. That's the thing. Nobody is in this for altruism anymore. There is no Jack Walkers buying football clubs. This is all money making. Manchester United would trumpet it. So Jim Ratcliffe coming in, Manchester United fans were like, yeah, this will clear the mess up. Great if you can spend more on the money in the transfer market by making 500 people redundant, go at it, But there's nothing to say that 73-year-old British billionaires who made their money in the petrochemical industry know how to run a football club better than people who run sporting organisations and focus on the way these are run in more minutiae of detail.
Well, this is, there's a comment here. FSG did the bare minimum in return for the maximum. They're shrewd businessmen. They don't really love the club. They love the money the club makes them. I think, well, how many owners around the league love their clubs? I can't even think of any, really. There might be the odd owner who is a boyhood Ipswich fan or whatever. I'm not 100% sure, but that is very uncommon. And if you want rich owners, you're not going to find people who love the club because you're looking for the very richest people in the world. And as well as doing the bare minimum, redeveloping Anfield isn't the bare minimum, is it? These are big strategic things that they're doing. And all right, could they buy more players? Yes, but to say they've done the bare minimum is just, surely that's misguided.
No, this thing it's incorrect. Yeah. Because if anything, they've created a strategy and a culture and to put things in place whereby the idea being that it shouldn't matter so much who's the manager of the football club and the success doesn't live and die by who's the manager. It's more a way of doing things, and you find the right people to fit those jobs, which they found a manager who aligns with what the ethos of the football club is and kind of the route from academy to the first team and everything around it and the way they recruit. So it's just incorrect to say they do the bare minimum because they want Liverpool to succeed because there is financial reward attached to it, because they are a company made up of billionaires and venture capitalists and investors. But that's every single Premier League team. That's every single team across Europe. None of them are. I mean, it's like when a player thumps the badge, and this means more unless they're born in that city and they grew up supporting that football club. Doesn't mean more. It means more because it's happening in the moment. So it's they want Liverpool to succeed for financial benefit. Also because they will be emotionally attached to it. Maybe not. John Henry might not have you'll never walk alone tattooed across his chest, but certainly the people that it matters to if they've invested a long period of their lives in trying to turn around a football club. So Mike Gordon was heavily invested in what went on day to day at Liverpool. Billy Hogan, the same token. I mean, this is really unpopular opinions, but I'm not. I don't care about the transfer market. I think it's a completely made up construct of numbers which don't match ability, and there's so much emphasis put into who's spending what. I mean, people seem to care more about what the transfer net spend looks like as opposed to the players that actually came in. So look at some of the players that came in last. You look at the midfield rebuild they had for the price they paid. Why does it matter how much they paid for the players if they deliver the success? That's what matters, is finding the players that can be fit a system rather than who has the highest price tag. But it matters a lot to all the people that are there, and I know that because I know a lot of the people that work there, same as a lot of Premier League clubs. It matters enormously to them. This is people's livelihoods, and some of those people work for FSG as well. So they have an emotional connection to the club and the city, more so than just goes beyond maybe what John Henry and Tom Werner think. And this isn't a football club built on just John Henry and Tom Werner. There are myriad of other FSG people that operate commercially. I mean, they've got offices in the US and all over the show, So it's very much a global effort, and I think, but that's the case for a lot of football clubs. But I think you can acknowledge the big mistakes they've made. Ticket price increases over a few periods, very poor. didn't go through with it. The freezing of ticket prices this time against a backdrop when clubs like Manchester United are increasing them, and some clubs like Forest increased them by 25% last year. Villa charging almost £100 for Champions League tickets. I think there has to be an element of looking at the bigger picture. But I know what the cycle's like and what the news cycle's like, and it's it will be transfers. But as a football club, in terms of financial strength, they're very healthy. But they're also top of the Premier League. We're also still in the Champions League. So maybe we should just kind of enjoy good things when they're around.
Somebody asked at the top of the hour, can you explain why there's significant restraints in the market based upon stuff like Champions League football? However, Chelsea with the Conference League are able to splurge. Are we missing a trick, or are they set for financial ruin?
Over a period of time, the latter, because
Chelsea,
because the aim for Chelsea was to put together a team, and I get the thesis. It was to invest heavily in a team of. If you look at all the players they signed, it was basically a who's who of European football's most sought after young talent. You could have picked any. I think most of those players were linked with every top six club at some stage. But Chelsea went on they used the transfer trick, fully allowed, of amortization. I mean, a lot of the signings they made were before the rule change was made in, so they could spread the cost of transfers over 8-9 years. They've done this because they're looking at doing this and already having their transfer strategy done for a few years. So they're probably going to have plenty of lean years where they don't spend anything. But they weren't expecting to not be in the Champions League. The lack of competitive success is a massive shock to them. So, but they still have to find a way of getting back into the Champions League. And they've had to sell real estate. They've had to sell elements of the training ground, hotels, the women's team. So to themselves. So they've had to do all this creative accounting in order to make a lot of this happen. And the value of the stadium, the value of the club hasn't gone up much at all through all this. And they're also still left with the fact that they're going to have to find money at some stage to do Stamford Bridge up and kind of raise those commercial revenues. So again, there is Todd Bowley and Bedard Igbali and Jose Feliciano, who were Clear Lake, and all the other guys who make up. Hans-Jörg Wyss, who's a Swiss billionaire, Danny Finkelstein, and they are all in it. They all came into it thinking we've got the secret sauce. This is what needs to happen, and we're going to dominate European football with this strategy because no one's seen this. No one's seen this trick we're going to be able to pull, and they've not pulled it off. They've burned through managers, quickly. How many managers have had? They've got rid of Tuchel. They had Pochettino. They've got Maresca now. They went back to Frank Lampard for a bit, albeit as an interim. I just think it's but they came in and they've spent money, and that was exciting to people because they were involved in the transfer market relentlessly. But that's all predicated on the success. Being able to pay the bill long term is all predicated on them being able to get in the Champions League regularly. Look at the front of shirt situation. So they, with no sponsor, they didn't get the value they wanted because they know if they accept all the offers they were getting were for below the market value of what they felt was acceptable. And if they would have accepted it, that would have been the price point for their front of shirt sponsorship. Again, they've kind of the bet in the house really to on future success, and it's very, very dangerous. Yeah, it might work, but is it the foresight of billionaires who don't really have much, certainly no emotional attachment to Chelsea or London, and they have no real track record of being hugely engaged in the other sporting assets they own. I think it's reckless, and I've said it's reckless numerous times because you are basing your whole model on finishing in the top four, and that is very, very dangerous.
A couple more questions before we start to wrap up. Current financials, the state of the club. Do Liverpool have more wiggle room to take more risks in the transfer market?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. The thing. Problem they're going to have is if they're going to have to pay Salah and they're going to have to pay Van Dijk at least to stay to appease it. You know, the Trent one's always one of those you can see maybe he wants a chance, maybe somewhere, but if you're replacing a right back, cheaper. If you're trying to find a world class centre back and a world class attacker, and it's not just world class, probably the best in the world at the moment. You're gonna have to pay. You can't just put a project in there. They tried that they paid. I think they probably feel the Darwin deal has burnt them in terms of overpaying. But that said, they're gonna have to still pay good money to get someone in. You know, so the Isak one seems like the most. That's someone everyone would love to see at Liverpool. He kind of fits the bill, doesn't he? But that would be a.
You think they could they could put together? Let's say it cost 130 million. You think they'd be okay to put that together?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, these deals, the way however you structure these deals, Liverpool have got plenty of wriggle room when it comes to either it's the squad cost ratio that we're going to see. I mean, we've got PSR still again next year. We thought it was going to be the end of it this year. Got PSR next year. Liverpool are nowhere near being at the limit for PSR. They could lose 200 million or more and still be PSR compliant. It's not a consideration. But there's a few clubs in that boat. Spurs being one. Manchester City, they could probably lose 300 million and still be PSR compliant. But it's about once you change your approach in the market, you are then expected to pay. Liverpool have a wage structure, and once you start renegotiating at huge sums, you have to pay. The renegotiations are always with other players are always more expensive. Or when you start throwing money about in the transfer market, everyone talks. Everyone knows how much money you're going to spend. Everyone knows Liverpool have got money to spend, but the gift has always been to know that Liverpool will be willing to step away. And play hardball. So that Luis Diaz, for instance, he had a 60 million release clause. They waited till Spurs made a move on him, and they managed to get some intel from that Porto had an 8 million debt that needed satisfying within 3 days. So Liverpool paid the 8 million there and then before the deal was even complete to get the deal over the line, a far cheaper sum. So it's having the ability to be reactive. And opportunistic, I suppose, more than reactive. But they do need to spend this summer if they're going to even get close to, replacing Salah. But I think they'll want to keep him. But they need. It's going to have to be a summer of spend. I know everyone says this every year, but there has to come a summer where they do actually have to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will fall off. You can't find gems. Relentlessly, and it'd be interesting because it's Slot's first real. He's had a full season to see what's needed, and it feels like it'd be his first one where he's had a real say in what goes on. So be intrigued. And to see whether he... Klopp was always very aligned with FSG's way of thinking. I imagine Slot will be similar because that's probably part of the reason why they hired him. That said, I'd be interested to see whether he tries to force the issue beyond, on something he's really quite passionate about.
Okay, and finally... where are the areas of growth for Liverpool? Obviously, they've now finished, certainly for the time being, at the stadium. There's lots of talk of an Adidas deal, Liverpool switching kit supplier. Where are the other areas of growth for FSG and Liverpool in terms of...
Commercial still has a way to go. So there's always been 4 kind of pillars of revenue for football clubs traditionally. So 3, sorry. So you got your broadcast deals, you've got your commercial deals, you've got your match day revenue. Now, there's player trading involved in that, and Liverpool have always been okay at that. They could probably do more. So Chelsea have been very successful. One of the reasons they've been able to spend money is because they had this huge conveyor belt of talent from Cobham that they were able to farm out on loans everywhere and get great money for. So that's helped. Liverpool could do more with that. They've got a good crop of young players coming through that really need more game time, and there's value to be had there. But beyond those 3 pillars of revenue, every club now is chasing the global money. So finding ways to better monetize the international fan, and over the next 5-10 years, there's going to be strides made forward in that. I think where it kind of the rise of Web3 and things like that, we'll start to see more of that. So I forget what it's called, but it'd be a new way. So they've got that sphere. I don't know if you've seen it in LA. It's like you can basically they sell tickets like it's a normal game. They have these huge kind of convex screens.
Oh yeah.
And
Seamus,
looks
the
like
wrestler, was in there.
Oh really?
Because I thought he was at Anfield, and he put some things on his Instagram, and I thought, I didn't know he was at Anfield, and then I realised he was actually. It looked so realistic.
Over time, that's an immersive experience. So clubs are going to move towards doing more of that for their global fans and doing that kind of independently, so they can earn the revenue for that. Now that particular thing is a company which does that. But if clubs can find a way to connect their international fans with what happens maybe on a match day at Anfield more interactively, then that's going to be like another pillar of revenue. So maybe like, I don't know what you call it, maybe digital revenue or something like that. That would really, because the game's changing, the way people like Gen Z consume the game is far different to the way you or I would consume the game traditionally. So that's going to be the way over the next 5-10 years and longer term. How much money is going to be involved in that, I don't know, but there's going to be obviously money outlay to try and create these things. But I think we are, and it sounds awful, but from anyone that you speak to and kind of who is pouring money into football, football is the business of entertainment. Yes, it's to fans, it's culture, it's everything. It's tradition, it's and competitive success is the be all and end all. That remains because clubs need to be successful to be appealing. But this is the business of entertainment now, and the bigger teams will be starting to move towards becoming kind of like entertainment brands in the future. What happens with the Premier League broadcast deal in the long term? I don't know. Does it go towards streaming? I'm not too sure. I imagine that will be the case. We might see Premflix, where the league has control of its own rights in terms of having, rather than getting broadcasters in, they can they go straight to. They cut out the middleman, but there's lots more money left in football to be kind of wheedled out, and it sounds quite crass to talk about it in those terms, but that's the truth of the business of the game now. It's an entertainment business and it's worth a lot of money to a lot of people, but it's still important to be mindful financially. And I think going back to the original point, that's probably where FSG are at.
Dave, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for questions, your thoughts, everyone who's commented on YouTube, whether you like FSG or not. We appreciate your involvement. We'll be back on Friday recording the Blood Red podcast as normal, looking back on the PSG game and looking ahead to Southampton on the second leg of PSG. So join us then. But for now, thank you very much, Dave. Cheers.
Thank you very much.